Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the third session in our four-part IGear and Ignition webinar series, Visual Management Simplified Ignition Views in OneSource. I'm Sydney Wall. I'm an engineer on our customer success team, and I'm joined today by Celine Mbanasor, the Director of Customer Success here at IGear. Across this series, we're going to show how Ignition and Squeaks work together to extend alarm visibility, drive action, and accelerate response. Together, the platforms keep teams connected, improve accountability, and reduce downtime. To start, I want to spend a moment on the core functionalities of visual management boards, whether they're paper-based or digital. So these foundational elements really shape how teams communicate, stay aligned, and drive daily performance. So the first one is visualization of standards and performance. And one of the biggest priorities is really making performance and expectations visible, which means clearly showing performance against daily, monthly, or annual goals. And many teams use tools like FMDS boards, SQDC boards, or other production boards to surface this information and keep everyone aligned. Strong visual systems also help define roles and responsibilities. So they support on-the-job learning and reinforce ownership through standard work, shift responsibilities, or continuous improvement activities. Another key component is really tracking issues and countermeasures. So visual boards make it easy to see what problems have occurred, what actions are being taken, who's involved, and the current status of each task, helping those teams stay focused and accountable. At their core, these tools really help to build culture. So they reinforce safety, quality, efficiency, and other values by keeping expectations front and center. They also create opportunities for team building and shared ownership of success. Visual management really connects daily work to that bigger picture. So when teams can come in and see how decisions impact performance, it strengthens their purpose and reinforces alignment within those organizational goals. And then that last one, communication and collaboration, is really critical. So line meetings and stand-ups need to be short and clear and actionable. A well-organized visual system really supports that, helping those teams quickly review what happened yesterday, identify priorities for today, and stay aligned on what matters most.
So in the customer use case that we'll be working with today and kind of demonstrating throughout this presentation, we'll be focusing on when a customer approached us that they wanted to digitally transform their visual management boards. So that customer, as you saw in the previous slide, they had a paper-based board out on the production floor, actually many of those paper-based boards, where they would hold beginning of shift huddle meetings, where they would review various different KPIs like safety, quality, delivery, cost, better understand, what happened the previous shift, what happened the previous day, how can they align with company goals and promote continuous improvement from there. And when they approached us with this use case of wanting to digitally transform their visual management boards, it really became a 4-stage approach. So we'll go into each of these stages accordingly. And the first stage was to really create what we call paper on glass. So on their paper-based boards today, they have printed out Excel documents, they may have printed out PDFs, printed out reports, and all of those types of sources, they wanted to ensure that those same sources would be linked to their digital visual management board so that they wouldn't miss out on any of the information they would get with paper today. Next, they wanted to eliminate that proximity constraint, where today with a paper-based board, you have to be physically out on the production floor to maybe see that information. When you're bringing it into a digital type format, how can they ensure that you can be out on the production floor still seeing that information, but you can also see that information in your office, on your laptop, on a mobile device, or wherever you are? And also, it needed to be as easy to use as paper. So with paper, what they do today is they print out the different documents and the different sources, and they basically paste them or attach them to those paper-based boards. How can they ensure that those same team leaders and team members that are creating those paper-based boards are able to easily transition into a digital format where anyone can create those boards in a no-code drag and drop approach? But as you start to bring all of these sources of information into a digital format, and you're making them more accessible with eliminating those proximity constraints, you also need to ensure that user authentication when it comes to security and privileges is addressed. So you may have certain boards that contain more sensitive information that's meant more so for upper management, for example. You want to ensure that you are assigning privileges easily to users or user groups to make sure they're only seeing information that they should be seeing. And lastly, taking it a step further with the paper on glass, today in the paper-based boards, anytime that they needed to have a report, let's say, that brought in new data, Excel document was updated, a Power BI report that they typically print out has new data now. What they would have to do is go print out that new report and then go out to the production floor, replace the old piece of paper with the new. How can they ensure with the digital format, they kind of eliminate that manual process where they know that because they're linking to where that source is, they're automatically going to see the latest version of that particular report. Everything will be live, so everyone's viewing the same information no matter where they are and up to the moment. So starting with linking your existing siloed sources, again, in their paper-based boards today, they may have Power BI, PowerPoints that are printed out, Word documents, Excel, Power BI reports, PDFs. These are all printed out today and put on these paper-based boards. And they needed to make sure that those same types of reports are now accessible, as you can see on the right-hand side, and visible within the digital visual management board. But the challenge with this is this information is very siloed. So a lot of times you don't understand or don't always know where these sources are hosted. They may sometimes be stored in particular network drives. They may be stored on SharePoint sites. They may be stored on Teams folders, but sometimes you don't know who the owner of that document is or where it's located. So the information is very siloed. So what you're able to do with the One Source platform, as you'll see throughout this demonstration today, is you're able to link to where those sources of information are hosted today. So again, whether it's a SharePoint site or a Teams folder or a folder on the network, for example, or a Power BI workspace, you're able to go to where that file or that report exists today, establish a connection to that resource host, and then from then on, you're able to link the sources within that host into your digital visual management board so that users are always able to see the most up-to-date version of those sources. So essentially, you're bringing all these siloed sources into a single pane of glass, as you can see on the right-hand side. Next, again, it needs to be as easy to use as paper, where it's user configurable, no code, where the same team leaders or same team members are able to go in and easily create boards just like they would with a paper-based format. So what you'll see here in this demonstration is if a user wants to go in and be able to add different types of sources to their board, they have a drag and drop interface where they're able to put their board in what they call a design mode, add a source to that board, drag and drop the region of the board they want to add that source to. They then can browse through all of the resource hosts they've connected to, select the source they want to bring in, press OK, and then they can adjust the sizing of the source or where the source is located on the board as needed from there. But again, very easy, no code, any user can do it. And you want to make sure it doesn't require having to go to an engineer or developer to be able to create these boards, that any user would be able to do it. From there, it's important that it's live sources and thumbnail previews. So as I mentioned earlier, today, as those reports are updating with paper, you have to print out new pieces of paper that have the most updated reports and go out to the production floor and replace the old with the new. And a lot of times, by the time that report's out there, it may already be out of date with new data coming in maybe every second, every minute. So it's important that you are always able to see the most up-to-date information no matter where you are, whether you're on the production floor or again in your office. And by connecting to the resource hosts where these sources are hosted and where they're located, you're all able to automatically bring in those changes as changes are made without having to replace the sources themselves. And with that, with each of these, you can see there is a thumbnail preview for the different types of sources, like the Power BI reports on this board, the Excel documents, the PDFs, and so on and so forth. But with those update, and you can also open them full screen to view them live as well. And when you're opening these reports full screen, again, making it as easy to use as paper, it's important for it to be as intuitive as possible. So when you're opening up a PDF, for example, you're able to, just like you do in a web browser, scroll through the table of contents to go to a particular section of the report, scroll through the document. You can jump to a particular page number, or you can even search for keywords within the document. When you're opening up a Power BI report, for example, instead of on paper where you're printing out a static view of that report, you're able to make a live API call to that particular Power BI workspace to grab the latest data. And then if you have different filters and criteria set, you're able to drill down into that information directly within the application so you can better understand what happened the previous shift, what happened the previous day, and how can we promote continuous improvement from that. Sometimes our customer with certain Excel documents, they required with Pencil that a team leader would go up and initial certain areas of the document or add a date or status to certain areas of the document. So it was important for them where they would still have the opportunity to do that. So within the application, you're able to make manual data entry changes to Excel documents for users that you assign privileges to. And then you can save those directly within the application. And because, again, you're connecting to where that source is hosted, you're connecting to the file itself, it will save all those changes to the file. And then lastly, if you have a dashboard, for example, that's being populated from different data sources and you're tracking different KPIs, you're able to see those KPIs and metrics update in real time. And with now you have that elimination of the proximity constraints, one thing that was important to them was to really ensure that if there are boards or certain sources that are meant more so for upper management, they have more sensitive data, that they're able to easily define user permissions on authentication. So here you can see user can go in, check off the users and user groups that they want to define permissions for. And then they can select, do they want view permissions, annotate, edit, or full control? Define those there, press OK, and that's added easily. Again, not requiring any coding, not requiring an engineer to get involved. Now, that first stage of their use case was the paper on glass. So taking those sources they have today and bringing them into a single pane of glass. The next stage is extending the capabilities of their paper boards by bringing in ignition reports into one source. So you can see on the right-hand side here, they're bringing in ignition perspective reports, but you can also bring in reports that are populated through ignition data. So you have, for example, Power BI reports that may be getting populated through data coming in through ignition. You may have Squeaks dashboards that are populated with ignition tags, for example. All this information now and this live data you're able to see on a single pane of glass. So with ignition in one source, you're able to connect to machines for automated data collection. And our customer really used the term of the board now starts to populate itself. So you're now able to see live information instead of static information on paper. You're also able to contextualize your factory floor data. So better understanding, instead of just seeing certain data points, you're understanding what shift did this data occur in or take place in, what part was being produced, for example, and really better understand your data to promote and better engage with real-time insights. So that way you can, again, analyze what went wrong the previous shift, what went wrong the previous day, and how can you promote continuous improvement from that. So in this board here, what you'll see is, for example, an ignition alarm history report, you're able to open that directly within the application. Look at any previous alarms that have been cleared or acknowledged, where they came from or the type of alarm. But you can also see new alarms that are coming in, the active alarms, if they've been acknowledged, what area. And then you also have where you may have perspective dashboards that you want to bring in, be able to track different metrics like OEE or quality, good parts, bad parts, downtime. And with that, just like you saw within the Power BI report, you're able to drill down into that information from the ignition perspective reports directly within the application. And how these two are integrated together is when you're creating resource hosts in the Squeaks and OneSource platform, there is a host type called website where you're able to bring in different web pages from any application. So to add a new Ignition web perspective app, for example, you can give it a name. You can copy paste the URL. If your Ignition report does require authentication, you can pass in the authorization key to the URL. You can define a startup JavaScript for the host to use, or you can define, as you can see here, an authorization header key value pair, where anytime someone would open that report, it would pass in that authorization header key value pair and automatically authenticate against the report so that users wouldn't have to manually log in each time. But also, if you do want to require them to log in, they can do that as well. Now, the next stage of the extended capabilities for the customer's use case was, okay, they created paper on glass, then they brought in live information from Ignition into their boards, where the boards are now populating themselves with real-time data from PLCs, from machines, from databases, for example, through Ignition. Now they're also wanting to add additional types of sources that maybe they can't have on paper today. So for example, if you have videos, that can be safety videos, training videos. It may have different types of reporting platforms that are web-based. For example, you may have SQL Server reporting services or Grafana. Or you can have, as you can see on the bottom right-hand corner here on this board, activities and tasks within your board where you're organizing different activities under tasks, organizing those into buckets where you can assign due dates, you can assign contributors, you can color code them. You may want to include the weather, as you can see on the bottom left portion of the board, or right next to that, there are meeting notes where you can say, upcoming quality control circles, upcoming meetings, or different types of announcements for your team. You may even want to just include the date and time as a type of source on your board, or just your company color schemes. That's important to standardize and keep your board streamlined across all your different departments with specific color coding and layouts. So as you'll see here, if you do have different, for example, training videos or safety videos, those can be played directly within the platform. They can go full screen. They support sound. You can pause them and play them as needed. And now you have additional sources like the Ignition perspective apps, Ignition data, videos, web pages that you can bring in that maybe you couldn't bring in before. So with all of these resource hosts, again, in summary, you're able to bring in Microsoft 365 files, whether they're hosted in SharePoint, in Teams folders, or a folder on the network. You can integrate with your Active Directory, whether that's hosted in Azure on-premise, to streamline your logins across applications. You can bring in different web applications like your Ignition perspective apps, or maybe different types of web-based reports that are populated with Ignition data as well. You can bring in video files or real-time streaming protocol video that you are not able to bring into the paper-based format. And then beyond just being able to print out a particular report, you're now able to dynamically drill down into your reports, whether that's Power BI, or Grafana, or SQL Server reporting services. And all of this data is now available also within Microsoft Teams, so where you can easily access this data no matter where you are. The last stage of their use case was extending the capability with enhancing the collaboration of their board. So they have these beginning of shift huddle meetings, but today, how do they drive action from those boards if they see something heading in the wrong direction, especially now that that data is live coming from Ignition? And this is really where Squeaks, OneSource, and Ignition all tie together. So if you are having a beginning of shift meeting and you notice that something's trending in the wrong direction, how can you create faster response times by integrating messaging where you're targeting particular teams or users, even within Microsoft Teams or the Squeaks mobile apps, and automatically making them aware of the particular issue or KPI that you're seeing going south? From then, how do you help them resolve the issue faster by providing them with customizable workflows that give them step-by-step guidance on how to troubleshoot or resolve the issue, and also have time-based escalation rules that automatically bring in expert help if a user or team member doesn't respond within a given amount of time or doesn't resolve the issue within a given amount of time. And then once that's complete, you have the ability to track progress on all of your action plans because you have a better understanding of the resolve process of your different types of events that are occurring on your huddle meetings. So you can better understand with a new historical data set of every single action taken of your mean time for response and your mean time to resolve, so that you can really understand how can you improve that, how can you improve your response times and resolve times. So here on the left-hand side, you can see there's the ignition perspective report. Maybe we notice something's heading in the wrong direction. We want to bring attention to that to a group of users within Microsoft Teams. Here you can see you can create a message directly within the application, include a snapshot of that message, and even define a workflow escalation rule, target a particular team. And once they click OK, that automatically goes out to users within Microsoft Teams with a snapshot of what that group at the production floor, for example, is looking at. So they know, even though they're not a part of that meeting necessarily. From there, the user can take action and respond to the squeak and interact with the workflow, again, directly within Microsoft Teams, helping you better get people in the know that may not be physically there with you in those huddle meetings as well.
Yeah, so with OneSource, you're able to bring together data from multiple systems, including Ignition, into a single centralized view that's really accessible wherever your team needs it. You can view OneSource boards on touchscreens on the production floor, desktop and laptop computers, as well as mobile devices, giving everyone from operators to supervisors to even remote team members access to the same real-time information. Whether you're standing at the line, working from your desk, or moving through the facility, you can quickly check those metrics, track progress, and stay aligned on what's happening. OneSource also is able to integrate directly with Microsoft Teams, as we saw, so teams can access those key boards and dashboards inside a platform they're already using every day for communication and collaboration. Altogether, those capabilities ensure that your organization has the visibility, accessibility, and flexibility needed to make informed decisions really anytime. With OneSource, creating the right board for your team is simple and flexible. You can build digital interactive boards that mirror your daily meeting flow, all without needing to write any code. This makes it easy for teams to standardize how they review information and stay aligned. OneSource also helps break down those silos by linking data from multiple sources into a single pane of glass. Instead of jumping between systems, your team can see everything they need in one place. Boards can be accessed from those kiosks, touchscreens, or mobile devices, giving those teams the flexibility to view information wherever it's most useful, whether that's at a workstation, in a meeting room, or out on the floor. You can also integrate live data from Ignition, so those key metrics, performance indicators, and real-time events update automatically as those things change on the line. And to ensure the right people see the right information, OneSource includes secure access controls, allowing you to manage permissions and protect that sensitive data with ease. Together, these capabilities make it easy to build boards that are interactive, connected, and fully aligned with how your team is working every day. Thanks again for joining us today for our third session of our Better Together IGear and Ignition webinar series. Our next session is going to be on December 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and we will be covering how Ignition meets Microsoft Teams, real-time collaboration where you work. So we'll send out today's recording soon, and we hope to have you guys join us for the next session as well. Have a great day.